You are front and center.
Immigrants have the right to access an attorney.
How can you represent a criminal? And can you talk specifically about that to people who aren't familiar and maybe just don't understand truly what's happening?
People were using this same argument to justify parents being separated from their children.
You are on a legal team that is going against our government, Kristi Noem, protecting democracy and citizens' rights.
And it's really painful because work never stops. You can't turn it off, right? I absolutely want to serve the immigrant community, but I don't want to be an immigration lawyer. It's too difficult.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Empowered with Gina podcast. Today's special guest is somebody who is leading the charge in our country right now to save democracy, to protect due process and the rights in the law and all of our rights. And so I thought, what a perfect time to introduce you all to Miss Gina Amato of Public Counsel. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Gina. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I'm happy you're here, friend. So I always start my podcast asking my guests to name 3 adjectives that describe themselves.
3 adjectives: fierce, creative, and relentless.
Yes, ma'am. So yes, right now you are part of a team leading the charge against the government to protect the community and the people's rights. But where did Gina Amato grow up? Where are you from? Tell me who that little girl was.
Yeah, I was born and raised right here in Southern California. I was born in Harbor City, raised in Torrance, California. After graduating from high school, I went to UC San Diego, so moved to San Diego, and then up to the Bay Area, where I pursued my law degree and master's in public policy at UC Berkeley. I was up there for about 10 years, and then I moved back to Los Angeles in 2007, where I've been since.
Was education a big focus in your upbringing?
It really was. My mom, who is an immigrant from Parral, Mexico, she came here as a child to the United States, and she put herself through school as a young woman, and eventually, she started teaching ESL, English as a second language, at Gardena High when I was a kid. And then she became a vice principal, and then a principal, and then a middle school director. And she was part of LAUSD for more than 35 years, I think. So education was and is a huge focus in my family, as it is in many, immigrant families. Education is sort of the key to upward mobility and stability. And my mom is absolutely a proponent of education, not only with me and my brother, but with the whole family.
Absolutely. So you obviously experienced and are the result of that dream, the American dream, right? And the immigrant story. And so often we don't highlight, people don't really see these tremendous success stories like yours, where your mother's journey in and of itself was harrowing to be here in a country where initially she didn't speak the language, I'm assuming. And you're displaced. You don't have your community. You're in a brand new place. And a lot of us, especially Americans, I don't think we can even empathize with that, and to put ourselves in that extreme condition and that mindset. And then with that, having to raise children and navigating all of that. So as a young child, was being a lawyer your dream, or where did that come from?
Being a lawyer was not really my dream. And this kind of brings me back to one of my core memories when I was in 3rd grade, which is actually the grade that my daughter's in right now. And the local high school journalism team came to our elementary school and asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And my answer was like, duh, I want to be a singer, a model, and a dancer. And then they asked, do you want to go to college? And I remember saying, I don't know yet. And when my mom read the little excerpt, she said, oh, mija, you are going to college. And I remember saying to her, Mom, I'm only in 3rd grade. I don't know what I want to do in the future. And she was like, that's fine, but you are definitely going to college. And so it was never a question that I was going to go to college. Did I want to be a lawyer? I don't remember that being a dream. As I came more sort of into myself and into just my consciousness. Like, I really remember wanting to be more of like a psychologist and a support for people. And then when I was in college at UC San Diego, I studied the civil rights movement. I took a class specifically on the civil rights movement, and reading the texts of Malcolm X in particular really radicalized me. And that's really what made me go to law school, was that I could see clearly from that education how being in the law, how the law shapes people's lives. It shapes everything about our lives. And so I wanted to go to law school to gain the tools to empower people and to fight injustice. So really, I went to law school to become a civil rights lawyer. And then in my first year of law school, they have what's called clinical programs, clinical opportunities, where you can represent real life clients and work on cases. And the first clinic that was available to me as a first year student at Berkeley was the Central American Refugee Clinic, was what it was called. So I got to represent an asylum seeker. And that's really what sort of lit the fire in me, that like, this is the practice that I'm passionate about, that I'm good at, that is felt like a natural fit for me.
And so I can't imagine, I want to come back to where you are now, obviously being a practicing lawyer at Public Counsel, but going to law school, I assume you didn't know any lawyers or anyone who had gone, or did you?
No, I did actually. My dad was actually an attorney. He passed away 7 years ago. But my dad was an attorney. No, that's okay. He was a criminal defense attorney. He had his own office. So I was very lucky in that respect that I had exposure. You know, I know a lot of people who come from immigrant families or are the children of immigrants who never met an attorney before, you know, and I had that privilege of being exposed to the law through my dad. So I was lucky. I was privileged in that sense that I did have exposure to the law. I did know attorneys. I had attorneys in my family. My dad was very different from me. You know, practicing law for him was really just his job. It was his way to support us, his family. He wasn't an advocate. He wasn't passionate about his work. So it was very different. But I was really lucky to have that exposure.
Okay, well, see, I even made the assumption, oh, you didn't know anyone, just because statistically, someone with an immigrant experience or upbringing, like your mom was, they just don't have, and even kids here, socioeconomically depressed areas, they are not exposed to or even know a lawyer other than what's on these billboards, which,
right.
Don't get me started on them. So going back to your law school journey specifically, a lot of people, I mentor a lot of students, and I'm always encouraging, especially women, to get into law and to go to law school. Did you struggle, or did you find law school to be easy for you, or what was generally that experience for you?
Yeah, I definitely didn't find law school easy. I struggled not necessarily with the content. I struggled more to see the relevance. Like, how was this education going to help me get to where I wanted to be? It was really a means to an end for me. I also was enrolled in the public policy master's program at the same time. I did a joint program. Now, that program was really hard for me. I thought it was the harder of the two because it's really focused on economics and numbers, and so that I found really challenging. But, you know, for me, I just really focused on the public interest world. Like, how could I get real life experience as an advocate? How could I fight for social justice even as a student? And how could I forward my mission of being a civil rights advocate?
Can you share with me, after you did finally get a job working in social justice, is there a case that sticks out to you where it felt maybe full circle, or just the fulfillment? I'm sure there's so many, but is there anything in particular that stands out for you?
There are so many. I mean, I think before I get there, I want to say, like, I've done a lot of different types of work. So when I graduated from law school, I did eviction defense. I was in downtown Oakland working with really low income people who just simply couldn't pay the rent because of the economic crisis that we've been in for a pretty long time. Then I went on to do law school admissions back at Berkeley, where I worked with students directly and helping to provide them with access to quality legal education. Then I finally found that civil rights job that I went to law school for and found that I really didn't like that work at all. And that's when I came back to immigration in 2008 and have been with Public Counsel ever since. So, in those 23 years, I've had a lot of cases that have really moved me, and I'm still very much in touch with those clients. So, I think one in particular that just sort of jumps out of my mind is a young woman that I represented who grew up actually in Torrance, where I grew up. And she was from Brazil. She was brought here to the United States as a child, and she was horrifically abused by her father. He forced her to bear three of his own children, and then tried to kill her. And she was in her 20s when her story came out, and she was able to get help. And so our office helped her get a U visa, which is a form of immigration relief available to victims of crime who cooperate with the police. And then ultimately, when it came time for her to apply for her lawful permanent residence, it was a really difficult journey because she had broken free from the abuse of her father and landed right into another abusive situation with a boyfriend who forced her to drive a car while he and his friends burglarized homes. So she was arrested and incarcerated, and that's when I stepped into the case to prove that her experience was a direct result of her traumatization, of her trauma and her victimization, and that she was deserving of a second chance and of the opportunity to heal. And so I did all of the work while she was incarcerated, which is within itself a big challenge. And she was so bright and so motivated, and I was so moved by her and her story and just so invested, and we won that case. And so she was released and she received her lawful permanent residence, and I actually just heard from her probably 2 weeks ago, and she's doing great. She has I think it's 5 children. She's working. She loves her job. She sent me pictures where she's glowing. She looks amazing. She looks happy. And she's somebody that you'd look at and you would never imagine what she's been through. And so I'm just really inspired by her because I think that she turns this whole negative narrative about immigrants, particularly immigrants who have been involved in the criminal justice system, turns that entire narrative on its head, and just really shows that trauma can lead to some really negative outcomes. It can drive people to do things they wouldn't otherwise do, and that people can redeem themselves. They're worthy of second chances, and they can recover. They can heal. They can live productive, law-abiding lives. And so that's one story that I'm really inspired by. One client, I should say, that I'm really, really inspired by.
I appreciate that you bring that up because I remember in law school, and there's a lot of people who listen who have no law experience. They don't know law school. They're nowhere in the law field. And I oftentimes, I'm sure you get this too, some people say, how can you represent a criminal? How can you help someone who has committed a crime, and then forget it if it's like a really grave, horrific crime? Can you share just your insight as a lawyer, having to sometimes help people who have committed crimes, and share with people who aren't familiar with the law how you work through that?
Yeah, so I think that there's so many layers to this question. One, we're all human. We all make mistakes, right? That's like number one. Number two, many of us have been subject to really traumatic experiences, and trauma oftentimes makes us do things that we wouldn't normally do, whether that's use drugs to cope with the pain, whether that's steal something, whether that's engaging in some other compulsive behavior to self-soothe. There's a direct link between trauma and those behaviors. So that's an important thing. Another thing is that our criminal justice system is deeply flawed. There's systemic racism in our justice system, from policing to incarceration to sentencing. And so we can't always take that at face value, that if somebody has a criminal conviction, that means that they're a bad person and that they're unredeemable and they shouldn't be given a second chance. So I try to come to these situations with an open mind. I try to ask the questions that I need to ask to understand the context in which this person engaged in this behavior. And then ultimately, my role as an attorney is not to judge the person, it's to help the person, and empower them and to guide them through a process. Now, with that said, I too am only human. So there have been situations where I've learned of an act or a crime that somebody has committed that has prevented me from being a neutral, zealous advocate for that person. And so then it's my ethical duty, I think, to be able to detect that within myself and to draw that boundary and say, you know what, I am not the best person to represent you, because our ethical duties as attorneys is to be a zealous advocate. We are hired warriors, right? Where our job is to go to the mat for you. So if there's something inside me that I know is preventing me from doing that, I have to step aside and let that person find an advocate that is going to go to the mat for them. And I can say I can only recall one time when this happened to me in my current position. And it was a hard decision to let this person know that, yes, I believed that they were eligible for immigration relief, but that I was not in a position to represent them.
Which is so strong in and of itself, because understanding and knowing your boundaries in a work setting, but in any life setting, is so vital, is so important to protect that, because that in and of itself will produce trauma, right? If you force yourself to stay in these situations or relationships or whatever it was. Okay, so let's talk about what's happening in our country. You are front and center. You are on a team, and if you can articulate a little bit better than I can, you are on a legal team that is going against our government, Kristi Noem, protecting democracy and citizens' rights. Can you share high level 2025, what has that looked like from you, and how different is it from how you've practiced in the past?
Yeah, so I direct the Immigrants Rights Project at Public Counsel, which is a 30-member team of attorneys, social workers, and administrative staff that is working not only to provide direct legal services to underserved immigrant communities, but also challenge unjust immigration policies through strategic litigation and policy advocacy. So, I mean, as you're alluding to, this year we are just seeing lawlessness and chaos and just a very sort of systematic violation of people's due process rights and constitutional rights. It's large and small. I mean, we're seeing daily policy changes. We're seeing raids. We've, been experiencing raids in Los Angeles since early June. So we're looking at 4 months that ICE has been in our city, really terrorizing our communities. We've seen the government disobey court orders. We've seen them just really push the boundaries in every respect. I have been with Public Counsel for almost 18 years, and for 15 years, I led our survivor team, which focuses on serving immigrants who have been victims of serious crime or human trafficking. And so, I did experience the first Trump administration, and we thought that we were prepared for Trump 2.0, but this is just far more horrific than we ever even imagined. And I think not just Public Counsel, I think all of our community partners have expressed the same, that there was no way to prepare for this level of lawlessness. In terms of our strategic litigation, we are co-counsel on Vasquez Perdomo versus Noem, which is trying to halt the roving patrols and use of racial profiling by ICE, as well as preventing ICE from, that's a double negative, as well as trying to compel ICE to give their detainees access to counsel. One of the things that we saw in the early days of this operation is that ICE is not only descending on the Home Depots and car washes and other locations where they believe the immigrants are gathered, but they are rounding them up without any reasonable suspicion, probable cause, or warrants, and then detaining them in a facility and preventing them from accessing counsel. So we are helping to litigate both of those issues, the Fourth Amendment issues, which has to do with the cause that they have to show that they have before detaining somebody, as well as the Fifth Amendment issues, which is the access to counsel issue.
And for people out there who maybe feel confused still about what's going on, because you see what the media puts out there, you see what's on social media, and a lot of it is just noise and it's coming at you. You don't know what to believe. I think what you have to share is so important because you're doing this day in and day out, and you're working with the people absolutely affected by this. And in particular, I want to talk about how there has been extreme denial of due process. And you mentioned it, how they're not people who are being detained, most likely wrongfully, are also not having access to a lawyer. And can you talk specifically about that to people who aren't familiar and maybe just don't understand truly what's happening?
Yeah, so immigrants have the right to access an attorney, but not an attorney paid for by the state, as you would be like in a criminal court, for example. So, but when they are detained, there are some nonprofit organizations that operate like giving classes and orientations within the detention centers, or they visit the detention centers to try to make contact with the detainees and represent them in their immigration matters. In the early days of the raids, what we saw was attorneys going down to B18, which is the federal building in downtown Los Angeles, and in the basement is where they hold immigrants. It's supposed to be a short-term facility, like a holding center, while they stage them to send them to a longer-term facility. And we saw, or I should say the community of advocates saw that ICE was just denying them access, just turning them away, not allowing the detainees to speak with the attorneys, and then basically shipping them off to other facilities. But, you know, the lack of due process is showing up in a lot of other different ways as well. Deporting people without giving them an opportunity to have a hearing before a judge, placing them in awful conditions so that they feel coerced to self-deport. Now there's a trend of trying to basically throw out an asylum case before it's even litigated before the court. I mean, there's a number of ways in which people's due process rights are being violated.
And these are all established processes per the Constitution, per our law. And a lot of the time I hear people say, oh, well, they're illegal aliens anyway, so they're not entitled to these rights. That's a lot of what I hear on the other side. Again, it's ignorance because that's not accurate. And I don't know if you could share a sentiment, or even what would you tell those people who are holding on to that? Well, they're undocumented. They're hurting our country. They're illegal. They're not entitled to any of this.
Yeah, I think it's a really slippery slope. I mean, that's kind of a nice way to put it. But, you know, our government sort of won the support of the American people on the platform that they were going to deport people who are a risk to our community, right? Either because they have criminal convictions or, yeah, there's somehow a risk. And that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing the vast majority of the people who are being rounded up aren't even the initial targets of the administration. They have no prior information on these folks, and most of them don't even have criminal records. So then the slippery slope is that then they turn to this argument that, well, if you entered without documents, you yourself are illegal. It doesn't matter if you have no, you haven't engaged in illegal activity. The act of entering the country without documents is illegal.
People are saying that. They're like, oh, well, it's illegal. You can't go to another country without a visa. If they require a visa, that's illegal. So that's a crime. That's what I keep seeing out there.
Right. And it's a misdemeanor. So imagine this consequence for any other misdemeanor. And by the way, people were using this same argument to justify parents being separated from their children. We're still seeing family separations. But during the first Trump administration, when the government was systematically taking children from their parents because they were crossing the border without documents and then failing to track the family members with no intention of ever reunifying them. They were saying the same argument that, well, you're engaged in illegal activity. This is what it is. If you come in without documents, you should expect to lose your child. Well, can you imagine if that same punishment existed for any other misdemeanor? Oh, you stole $50 worth of goods, therefore we're going to take your child. Oh, you, whatever it was, you got this misdemeanor offense, we're going to take your child. That would never fly. And I just think it comes down to sort of the base, I don't know, or the core belief that I just think that in general, the government and the American people don't see immigrants as people. They don't see immigrant children as children. They have a hard time seeing their own children in these kids, or seeing their own mother in the woman, the elderly woman who's detained for no reason, for being out on the street selling paletas or whatever it is. They have a hard time connecting those dots, or just refuse to.
Yeah. And I think that goes to the strategy of dehumanizing, making them the others, which is what the Nazis did. So I've been saying it. It's from the same playbook. You dehumanize, which will justify dehuman treatment, dehumanization. And so we understand that that's what it is. And it's so very real and happening. And it's not at other people's doorsteps yet, but it starts here. This is how it starts. And so, I don't want to go any further into that because we all know beyond that what's happening. And to conclude, I would love for you to share just high level for women specifically out there listening to you. You have a very difficult job. It's emotional, it's trying, but it's fulfilling, and you're fighting an excellent, worthy cause. For people that maybe have their own personal or professional battles, that are facing obstacles that are very difficult, trying, etc., what would you share with them that you use to talk to yourself to get through it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that it's important to find the position in this movement that is right for you. Not everybody, this isn't the right role for everybody, right? There are some people, like my parents are not undocumented. If my parents were undocumented, I don't know if I could do this. It's so close to the fire, right? And some of the people on my team, they are either undocumented themselves, or their parents are undocumented, and it's really painful because work never stops. You can't turn it off, right? You close your computer, and then now it's like caring for your family. So, I have enough distance, and I'm close enough to the issue, but also far enough to be able to actually operate in this space and function. I have also taught, and there are some students who tell me, like, I absolutely want to serve the immigrant community, but I don't want to be an immigration lawyer. It's too difficult. And so I think it's important to realize that you can support and serve immigrant communities in a lot of different ways, right? Like when I was doing eviction defense, I was serving immigrants. When I was doing even law school admissions, a lot of the students who I was working with were children of immigrants. So I think it's important to find your place in the movement that works for you, and because we need all the positions. We're a team, right? We need everybody to play their role in order to forward our cause. The other thing I would say is that it's really, really important to take care of ourselves. It's very challenging work. It's really scary times, and we need to nurture ourselves, rest, eat well, exercise, spend time with our loved ones, and generate joy, because that's really what's going to get us through these hard times and allow us to persevere.
Absolutely. It's a marathon, and we are of no good to anyone if we are falling apart, affected by stress. Stress kills, it depletes us, and it's terrible. And how can we be helpful and part of anything if we're not starting with ourselves? So I really appreciate you saying that, because a lot of people don't talk about it, but it really is fundamental in this marathon of life, especially. Mm-hmm. So Gina, I appreciate you so much. And I know we just did a panel, and I'm just so grateful for your insight and what you do. I know it's your job, but still your heart's in it, and we need you and people like you. So just a big thank you from community to you for everything you do to defend our country, truly, and us. And I'd love to have you back for an update later on, hopefully, things turn around. But in the meantime, we're here, and I'm here to support you however I can.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you uplifting me and the work that we're doing. And just a heads up that tomorrow morning we're arguing the preliminary injunction on the Fifth Amendment claim, the access to counsel in the Vasquez-Perdomo case, and we will win. So I look forward to providing you with an update.
You absolutely will. I appreciate you, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Here.
Bye.